It's too much. Okay, so hopefully we have a few more people coming in and we'll start.
Yeah, it's about 3 minutes after, so we've got a few people in already. I know some people are still joining, so if you guys want to get started, go for it.
Okay, I'm gonna just live tweet it right now before we go, because I meant to do it before, but then we had a little audio issue.
Your live exit.
Here we go. WIMNA Wednesday. Chat about legal contracts. Is this on the, is there a link, or I guess I could find the link through social?
Yeah, we'll have the link ready for later of this recording.
Okay, cool. All right, welcome everybody, and I want to welcome you to our WIMNA Wednesday, where this month, because they're once a month, we are talking to Lauri Eberhart, who is an attorney, and this is going to be actually really exciting because although we're going to talk about a few different types of contracts and agreements that you may encounter as a driver, we're going to actually touch on things that teams, sponsors, and venues consider as well. So this really will hopefully be informative for a lot of people about also just how the legal side of the motorsport industry works. And hopefully there'll be something for everybody in our discussion. So joining us tonight is Lauri Eberhart, who is the partner and founder of Apollo Sports and Entertainment Law Group. So Laurie is very well placed to answer a lot of the questions that we're going to have, and we're going to hopefully have a great discussion. Laurie, before we start, why don't you tell everybody a bit about your background and your expertise in law?
Sure, Beth, thank you for that warm welcome, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this platform. I'm passionate about mentorship and giving back to the community, so I appreciate this opportunity to do that. So I am a lifelong motorsports lawyer. I've been a lawyer for, I won't date myself, but for my entire career. I started as the general counsel at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and I worked at Charlotte Motor Speedway, was the general counsel of Speedway Motorsports when it was a public company, $1 billion company traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and did all of the securities work and the mergers acquisition work and things that go involved in being a public company. So then I left there and did some marketing. I actually ran the day-to-day operations of Charlotte Motor Speedway for 3 years, which was a ton of fun. And then worked at Richmond International Raceway. And after that came and started my own law firm with my partner, who's an entertainment lawyer, sports entertainment lawyer here in Charlotte. And we've been together for 9 years, and we are a sports entertainment law firm. We're 100% female owned, which is different. There aren't a lot of female owned law firms, and we solely concentrate on the sports entertainment world. We don't do tax, we don't do criminal, we don't do family, we do sports entertainment. So we're very narrow and deep in the areas where we practice, but we're very skilled at licensing, personal services agreements, protections of intellectual property, a lot of those things that are very unique to the sports practice. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk about contracts.
Excellent. And without obviously disclosing who your clients are, you can say that you do have professional drivers, and kind of like what categories some of your clients are in?
So my book of business is race car drivers, racing teams, sanctioning bodies, speedways across the country, across the globe, really, and then non-traditional sports, some other sports leagues, and some corporations that are in the mix that have their toe in the motorsports realm. But a lot of racing teams, specifically with drivers on the team side and the driver's side, the sanctioning body side, and the facility side as well.
And it's safe to say that they're names of people that everyone on the call would recognize.
They would, and if I didn't have a duty of attorney-client privilege, I would be more.
You would say who they are.
What they are, yes,
exactly. Absolutely. But the dead giveaway is always when you, if you see any attorneys kind of always at certain race venues, that kind of gives you a hint of that they're usually visiting clients. So
that's right.
So get to know an attorney. Okay, so we'll jump into some of these questions. And again, now while we're asking these, there's the ability, anybody can put questions in the chat. We have some questions that were sent in ahead of time. We're going to start with the conversation that's kind of framed out that Laurie and I talked about ahead of time of kind of what we think some of the key points are. But certainly if anybody has any questions while we go through this, to make it easy, if you could put your question in the chat, and I'll be monitoring that to make sure that, especially if we want to follow up and clarify anything. So let's talk about, again, when we talk about agreements, when we talk about exclusivity.
Mhm.
What exactly, I mean, a lot of us might make assumptions of what we think that means, but when we talk about exclusivity as it applies in an agreement like this, let's start again, like with a driver agreement. Again, maybe we'll talk about other things, whether it be a team agreement or a sponsor agreement. But in this example, when we talk about exclusivity in a driver agreement, what does it mean? And broad versus narrow, like what is that? And what would I want as a driver?
Yeah, great question, Beth. We see exclusivity as a heavily negotiated part of these driver services agreement or a sponsorship agreement that you're working on. And basically from a driver's perspective, if I'm a team and I'm signing up a driver, I want the broadest possible rights of that driver to be exclusive to me. They're only going to drive for me. They're not going to drive for any other team. They're not going to drive in any other series. They are 100% exclusive to me. And that would be my desire. And at the higher levels, I mean, we're talking Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, the highest levels, those are exclusive agreements where drivers are working for one team. They're paid a lot of money and they don't do other things. Now that's loosened up recently. You've got so-and-so is going to race, Kyle Larson's going to go race a short track race, or somebody's going to do the Baja 100. Those are special exemptions that are actually negotiated into those contracts at the front. You're exclusive to me. You're only going to drive for me, but sure, you can go run the 24 hours of Le Mans, or you can go run something else, but it's very heavily negotiated. That's from the team side. From a driver's side, you want to be very careful if you're signing that agreement that you're not giving away 100% of your rights. If you sign a deal and it's exclusive to one team and you're only going to run 10 times a year and they're not paying you a decent wage, you're going to be restricted in what you can do. So you want to make sure, what I've tried to do is if I'm representing a driver and I want to carve. So if you're a driver, you want it to be very narrow. You say, sure, I will be exclusive to you if it's your team and we're running this particular series. I won't run for anybody else in the series. But other than that, I can go drive for whoever else I want, because racers like to race. They want to go this weekend. They want to go next weekend. They want to race in 5 different series. They want to do different stuff. So when I try to say it looks like exclusive, but then when I put together the language, I'm not exclusive to, these 10 weekends. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those weekends I will be exclusive to you, but the other 42 weekends in the year I can do whatever I want. So the driver's going to want it to be more narrow. The team's going to want it to be more broad. And my advice, again, I have to say this up front, it's got to be on the legal record. None of this is considered legal advice because I'm not specific to your information. This is just very general. Yep. But what I would say to a young driver is, in that exclusivity provision, make sure you're only giving the particular dates that you want to be exclusive to that particular team, because you want to leave yourself open to broader opportunities. You don't want to be bootstrapped into an exclusivity clause that doesn't matter. Same thing with the sponsorship. If you've got let's say you've got a watch deal and the watch deal is, okay, I'll be driver. I want you to exclusively represent me. I'm going to pay you this money. These 10 weekends, I want you to represent my watch. Okay. That means other 42 weekends, I can have another watch deal. So the narrower it is on the driver's side, the better. Right. Now, if I'm a sponsor, I'm going to say, no, I want you 52 weeks out of the year for 3 years, and I'm going to pay you for that. Great. If the numbers work for you, that's the deal. But you want to make
sure the leverage becomes that, like, all right, if you want it all that time, then I need more money.
And that's where and that's where the opportunity comes. Yeah. If you want me 100% of the time, you got to pay me for it. And if you're not going to pay me for it, then I might wear a Rolex. It's not going to be 100% of the time. I might wear a Timex, So that's where and it's.
And then what is the likelihood too? Like, so let's say you write it as an exclusive agreement, because let's be clear, like a driver likes to keep that door open as much as they can, but sometimes it's again, if you're writing, let's say you have a 2-year deal, the reality is on day one, you don't know what opportunities are going to come across in the next 2 years. So for instance, an opportunity like Le Mans might come up, but you weren't thinking about that when you first signed that agreement, and maybe you signed something that was a little bit more narrow. What's the likelihood that you can go back to your team and get like an amendment to your deal because something like Le Mans did fall out of the sky and you have that opportunity, and maybe you weren't in the running? And let's be clear too, everybody's going to always want to think that those opportunities exist. We know, what, but it also is like, let's say over those 2 years time, you actually just improve as a driver. So now you are on people's consideration lists for some of those opportunities that you might not have been on day one. So is there an opportunity to go back and kind of renegotiate?
There is an opportunity to renegotiate, and a lot of times, because you want the document to be a living document, you say it's exclusive unless otherwise agreed to by the parties. That way, if something comes up, if you've got a good relationship with your team, it's an opportunity, the parties will agree. You can always go back and do an amendment. It's easier to just mutually agree to something, and then it's not a waiver, it's not a change. And those happen a lot. An opportunity happens, you want to go drive or race it, you talk to your team owner, and we just work it out. I don't see every once in a while people get really twisted up in their shorts about these deals, but most times people work it out.
Well, I think it is true. I mean, I've been in this situation where, okay, I've hired many drivers over the years, and the reality is we appreciate everybody's want to be driving. Let's be clear too that sometimes doing something like, using the Le Mans example, continuing on something like that, or like Kyle Larson is going to go do the Indy 500. These are high profile things that the original team gets benefit from too. So let's everybody's usually trying to get to a compromise and a solution because there's value all around. The one thing that, of course, remember that you want to make sure. I had a situation years ago where I had a driver driving for me, and it's one of those things it's always sticks in my mind as like a life lesson or business professional lesson, where I had a driver that we were driving in a certain series. This is when I worked for Fiat Chrysler, and our driver wound up doing something in the off season that might have been a little bit ridiculous, and he got hurt.
Right.
And so then he was now unable to fulfill his agreement with us. And I regret that. And we didn't have the clause in there. So he actually was still due to get paid, even though he really couldn't provide all of his services. He was having to get paid a little bit, not all of it, but a little bit. But even that little bit, is a painful check to sign, right? Because it was him doing, so in those situations, when you talk about like the protection of the team for the driver's perspective, so that driver understands, obviously you're looking at for your own interest and you want to drive here, here, and here, but you have to also understand that from the team's perspective or the sponsor's perspective. In fact, I know somebody had asked a question. I'm going to bump that question up that we were going to ask later but this might actually be a good point to ask. Somebody, Colleen H sent in ahead of time. How do you deal with an event such as a driver injury or wreck that could cause you to not be able to fulfill obligations to the sponsor? Now, this is about the sponsor, let alone whether or not it's actually, driving the car. But so in this question says, for instance, not being able to attend a meet and greet for the sponsor or even be able to complete the season. So just because I happen to bring that up, maybe we can go to that now. How do you handle those kinds of events?
Well, there's two things to your earlier point. If you're a team owner and the driver's under contract for you and he's off, there's a case with Jimmy Johnson was down at Isle of Palms and was on the top of a golf cart and he broke his arm and he couldn't drive, and it's a big deal. A lot of those drivers' contracts say if you are injured away from the track and you do something, you don't get paid, and there's some kind of penalty, which that covers. The drivers are not going to want to not get paid, so they're a little bit more safe. But it does happen. But you hit them in the pocketbook where it really happens. When the driver's hurt and can't perform under the a sponsorship agreement specifically, a lot of times there's a make good or there's a substitute driver, there's somebody else that we can put in that position. I know in this industry a lot there's make goods because you have rainouts, you have injuries, we're going to substitute somebody else just to make sure that the contract is performed. If the driver's out for the season, there would be some kind of substitution, either it depends on how the contract's written. If it could be, if I were the sponsor, I might want to say it's a force majeure and there's no way that the driver can participate, and therefore we're going to not make any kind of payments until the driver's back. And that would be a really extreme position to take. Most of the sponsors are send me another driver, send me somebody else that I can use, that I can fulfill my promises, that's equal level, that I can, do my hospitality, I can do my meet and greet. I would want, if I was a sponsor, I would not want to be on the hook for 100% of the consideration if just no driver showed up. That's not the benefit of the bargain, and that's not what I'm paying the sponsorship for. So the team's going to want to perform as much as they can. Also not only from a legal perspective, the legal ramifications are one, but just from a relationship perspective, if you've got a relationship with a sponsor and your driver's hurt, you're the relationship manager. You're going to want to do from a business perspective, do whatever you can to make sure that the sponsor's happy and that because you want that renewal and you want them to get the benefit of their work, you want to have a good relationship. So no matter what the legal consequences are, maybe the sponsor doesn't have to pay. Maybe it's a force majeure or something, or we can, the best interest is to work it out before it gets to people saying, well, the contract says this and the contract says that.
Right. Ideally, you've solved the problem before they even realize that a problem has occurred. So when you talk about like the term of an agreement, is it better to have a long-term, short-term? What are the benefits of both if you're a driver or a team?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is always, it depends, right? If you're
right.
From a driver perspective, it depends, short term. If I'm an up and coming driver and I think I'm going to go real fast and I'm going to have really good results, I may want a 1-year deal because I want to get to someplace. The sweet spot with driver deals are 3 years usually. Where they're not too long. They're long enough where the driver's got some consistency. They're not too long so that if at year 3, the driver wants to make a jump or the team wants to make a change, then you can make a change and you get into all the silly season stuff. Where I've seen the longest agreements are on the sponsorship on the facility side. Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola 600 was a 10-year deal, and there's a 10-year deal,
Wow.
there's a 10-year deal, and a 10-year deal. That makes a lot of sense for the facility owner because it's guaranteed income that you've got. You may not may not increase as much as you had expected, but at least it's consistent for 10 years. That's the other thing. If you've got a long year deal and you've got, let's say, a 3% escalator, and for those, an escalator would be year 1, we pay $100,000. Year 2, we pay 3% more, 3%. Every year it goes up 3%. That's an automatic escalator. Now, that may not keep track with inflation. It may not keep track with market, but you're locked into a 10-year deal. So you have guaranteed income, but you may have limited upside. Versus if you've got a 3-year deal, then we've got 3 years, we've got escalators, but then we renegotiate it again, we bring it back up to market. Now that's assuming that the market is always going up. So but
you have that vulnerability in case they don't renew.
Right. Yeah. And the vulnerability, they might not renew. You might renew at a higher rate, you might renew. So I hate to say it depends, but it really depends. You may be.
But these are those questions that you want to ask of your attorney when you are meeting with your attorney, because, you can't, the thing that I think a lot of drivers need to always remember is when they do get to a point where they're going to have an agreement, they're excited because they're finally going to get a deal. But there's these questions where sometimes your attorney has to be, you're like good cop, bad cop, where your attorney is asking all of these critical questions to make sure that you're thinking of all of these potential pitfalls that you might not be thinking of because you're just excited to get a deal done.
People are excited at the front end. They'll do a deal. They don't want to hire a lawyer because they don't think about it. They read through it. They sign it. They've given away way too much exclusivity. The deal is too long. They're not getting paid a good salary, and there's no way out. And that's where you get in a really tough position. So it's always worth it on the front end to get somebody else to look at it. Now, where we're sitting, and that's why people think lawyers are so cynical, but we've seen when the deals go bad. We've seen, this is what happens when this doesn't work out. This is what happened. So let's think about it up front. Yeah, it may seem like a lot of money for a 10-year deal right now, but what about a 5-year? What about a 3-year? Let's think about something a little shorter term that's going to give you some flexibility as your career goes by. It's always good to talk to somebody to see where those pitfalls are.
And ideally, it's somebody that has the experience like you do. Like it might be that, your uncle is a lawyer, your aunt is a lawyer, but they're a probate attorney. And that's fantastic that they do that. But this is sometimes there's some very specific things here. And to your point, like you've probably seen mistakes that have happened before and let somebody benefit from your wisdom of things that you've kind of seen before. Well, let's talk about personal sponsors versus team sponsors. So we know the term PSA, personal services agreements, are things that drivers can have on their own separate from the team agreement. What are those? If you can explain that, what are carve-outs and what should a driver ask for?
So a personal services agreement would be an agreement that a driver does with a sponsor. So the sponsor says, I'm Rolex watches and Beth Peretta, you're my driver, and I want to hire you, and I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars, and I want you to wear Rolexes. Not only do I want you to wear Rolexes, but 4 times a month, I want you to do a social media post. I want you to come visit my hospitality at the races 2 times a year. I want you to go do production and do commercials for me. You'll give me 8 hours of your day. You'll do commercials for me, and you will agree to, whenever you are at the racetrack, you will agree to speak positively about my brand. So in the personal services agreement, you as the driver would agree, okay, Rolex, I'm going to do these things for you. And then Rolex agrees that, okay, we're going to pay you X amount of, I'm going to pay you $100,000, $200,000, $50,000, whatever it is. I'm going to pay you that money. Where I see the biggest things in the personal services agreement is the demand on the driver's time. They overcommit themselves. Right. And a lot of times I see the spot when I have a driver, I see the sponsor agreement and it's just open. You will do promotional experience. You will do promotions for us as we agree anywhere in the world, period.
Right.
Okay. Well, does that mean every day you're going to fly me to China and you're going to have me do a promotional experience and you're not going to pay me any additional money? That's ridiculous.
And if for some reason you're in violation of that, they can also terminate your contract. Like if it's too open-ended and you don't have it defined, that leaves the door open for them to say, well, you're in breach, right?
Correct. If it's not clear, it's easy to get into a breach situation and then determine, yeah, you're correct. The agreement is terminated. What we try to do on the not is be very specific. The driver's going to do 2 social media posts. The driver's going to do, like I said, two production days that are limited to 8 hours a day, where the team is going to pay, or the sponsor is going to pay the travel for the driver to get there. They're going to fly business class. You're going to stay in not a Roach motel. You're going to stay in a nice motel. You're going to have transportation from the airport to the site, and the sponsor is going to pay for all that. That's fair. It's fair to ask for that because you're giving something to the driver now, or to the sponsor. So again, limited 2 production days per year of the contract. That's fair. Because Rolex is going to want to shoot a commercial. They're going to want to have you do cards. They're going to have you do point of sale stuff. They're going to have you use your image to do all those things. And that's fair that they do that. But we want to be specific to the production days, appearances. And then there's a difference between at track appearances. If you're at the track and the sponsor's there and they want you to come do a meet and greet, it's not an additional use of your time, and that should be thrown in the deal. If the sponsor wants to take you in a market, if they want you to go to a Rolex store, they want you to go to a watch store that's in market when the race is there, that's not an additional use of your time, and that should be thrown in. But if it's not a race weekend and they want to fly to San Francisco to go, well, you should have a per diem. It takes up some of your time. So they should pay you $500, $1,500 a day, whatever, plus your travel, plus your stuff. Usually what you see is at track appearances are included in the sponsorship. At race market are included. And then there's a limited number of out of market appearances, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. Depends on the deal, depends on how much time they have. But say it's 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, where you don't get an appearance fee, a per diem to be there, but they pay your travel. And then if they go over that, then you get a per day because it's taking more time. So out of your day, so you get a per diem plus your travel, and all that's detailed out in the sponsorship agreement, just so the sponsor understands what they have use of your time, but also you can commit to it. And you know that you can handle it and be you want to be a good partner with your sponsor because you want them to renew it. They did what they said they were going to do. They showed up. Right. They didn't breach. They didn't overcommit themselves. They were a really good partner. I want to do that again. That helps you on your renewals. But that all starts with being very, very clear with what. And so I find the biggest thing in those sponsor agreements is to very carefully delineate what is the driver going to do for the sponsor. It's easy from the sponsor. Sponsor's going to pay, and they're going to pay on time, right? The driver's got to be sure and manage the expectations of the sponsor as well.
I think that the 2 things to take away here, though, too, is, I mean, yes, we're talking about Rolex, and not everybody's going to have a Rolex deal. This can apply to your helmet sponsor, because maybe you're getting a helmet for free. Maybe you're getting your driver's suit for free, or your boots for free, or something like that, something that you're using, or a discount. Let's be clear. these personal services agreements aren't necessarily just because you're getting something free. It could be highly discounted, but in exchange, you are promoting that company. So even, an amateur and mid amateur and beginner pro may still have some of these personal services agreements that are not as majestic as doing a thing with Rolex. But the thing we want to remember is it's exactly the same, to articulate what you're getting in exchange. So it could be value in kind, it could be all of these things. And as long as the sponsor has outlined what they expect, it might be the 2 social media posts on a weekend, or it might be that appearance. The one thing we also want to remember and remind every driver or team, because a team can have, again, those deliverables happen to teams too. We're talking about personal services, which are drivers, but you want to make sure that you always have a running list of what things you have to hit on a weekend, right? Because you're a very busy race weekend, and you want your PR person or your marketing support, or if you have anybody with you, and if you don't have somebody with you, do it yourself, that on the beginning of your weekend, you look at all of your deliverables and how many, social media posts you have to create, because the last thing you want to do is get to the end of the weekend and realize that you forgot an obligation that you had, because again, you're going to be in breach of those agreements.
Absolutely. And you're right, Beth, even with a trade or you're representing the local Goodyear, they're giving you tires, or you've got somebody that's donating your driver's suit or your helmet or your safety equipment, or somebody's providing you, I don't know, your catering when you're on site, and it's a trade or it's a discount, you're going to have some obligations. Again, make sure they're commensurate with the value you're getting. If somebody's giving you a discount on tires, you're not going to travel cross country to promote them, but you will do something local in marketing. You'll do something that's fair. Make sure that you can do it and see those, and that's right. Make sure you perform, because it's only going to help you. If you're a good partner, it's only going to help you down the road. And they say, oh my gosh, we did a deal with her and she did everything. And then she gave us a little bit extra and she was so nice to work. It was so pleasant.
It doesn't hurt to give a little bit extra. It actually goes a long way. And speaking of that, this goes to another question, but we can kind of segue from what we just said, where we have a question from Samantha S. that came in ahead of time too, that says, what role can cross-industry comps play in the negotiation room? And I know we could talk about that when we're talking about just hiring and, and Laurie, you and I talked about this a little bit about like how comps can come into play in general. Like, let's say when we're looking at when we're hiring people, but we'll answer that. But interestingly, when we're just talking about personal service agreements, how about comps as they come into this? Like, what is the value of that local Goodyear store? What is the value of that local, again, maybe it's not Rolex, it could be the local watch retailer. Where do you find out what the value of those agreements could be? So comps in 2 different ways. One with regard to actual salaries, but then how about comps when it comes to the value of contracts?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question when you're talking about the personal services agreement and sponsorships. It's something we do here at the law firm because we're seeing so many different deals in so many different places. We know if something's a market rate or whether it's not. We can advise our clients, say, this is way too low, or this is a really good deal, take it and run with it, or it's something we're seeing the deals. Now, if you're boots on the ground, you should ask people. We particularly, we're so like, I don't want to tell anybody what my deals are, or I don't want to share anything. But I think we need to be more open about sharing what other people are doing so that we can all get to a certain market rate. I may be discounting myself too much. I may not be asking for enough money. I know for a fact the guys get paid more than the women do. So we should at least figure out what they're doing, what they're getting, and then ask for it. Just ask for it. Everybody can say no, but I think we should use comps when we're doing our research, asking our colleagues, seeing if people open up, but also being open about what we're doing so that we can rise the tide for all the boats and make sure that we're getting our value. There are services that you can pay for, not at the local level. I don't think there's anything other than asking your colleagues, hey, what are you getting for your tire deal? What are you getting for your helmet deal? What are you giving away? And making sure your deal's comparable or it's better than what they've got. But we do see a lot of deals, not only in motorsports, but in all different types. We're seeing NFL deals, we're seeing NASCAR, we're seeing all league deals. and can help. That's why if you've got a lawyer that has the experience and that's in it day to day, they can also guide you as to the value, the market value of what the deal is that you're putting together.
And again, why an expert matters in these kinds of things. It can be an expensive mistake if not. Question about, if we go back to driver agreements, question that we got from Colleen earlier was, is it better to negotiate a contract as an individual driver or as a legal entity? So,
Great.
yeah, how, and okay, and I guess I know there's going to be an answer of it depends. So how does it depend? And then, yeah, and then at what point maybe do you switch from being an individual driver to being a legal entity? Because those are different things.
Yeah, so good. It's a really, it's a really, really good question. And it's not just in motorsports, but it's something that's consistent across all sports and in entertainment as well when you're dealing with personalities, excuse me, that have a special talent and they're providing a service. But particularly with drivers, a lot of, well, many drivers form what's called a loan out company. And this is an LLC. And I'll just use, I'm Lauri Eberhart driver, and I form Lauri Eberhart LLC, and I form it in my local state. And it's a legal entity. You file the paperwork, you create it, you get a bank account, you put a little bit of money in it. What that does, legally, it does a couple of things. Your personal service agreements now will be between sponsor, Joe's, local Joe's Pizza Shop, is going to be on one side as the sponsor because they're going to bring you free food every race weekend. But then the contracting party on the other side is going to be my LLC, Lauri Eberhart LLC. What that does is it keeps the liability for that contract in the LLC, and I'm not personally liable to perform on it. What I'm going to have is an employment agreement with the LLC that says I will, as an employee, do whatever the LLC signs me up for. Then there's some legal things we have to do with some three-party agreements, but that's the way it worked. The contract would be between the pizza place and the LLC, and the contracting parties would be through there. What the LLC also allows, if now let's say the deal's a little bit sweeter and the LLC is getting paid, it's got a bigger deal, it's got I know the local Sunbelt rental is going to pay, $50,000 for a sponsorship. So they're going to pay into the sponsorship. That goes into the LLC. The LLC pays me a salary. I can get a better tax effect if it's going through the LLC than it's coming directly to me. So there are some financial implications that are involved. And I would advise, in addition to having a good lawyer on your side, you need a good CPA that's going to help you when you get to the higher levels, when you're generating significant income, to do some tax planning strategies, because the LLC, if you make a S Corp election, which is a particular tax election, is taxed at a 20% rather than your personal tax rate, which might be higher. So there are certain levels and strategies that you can use. From a legal liability, I was actually talking to one of my not yet clients, but somebody that hopefully will be calling me, that's a Corvette racer. I was talking, I said, how do you run your, I said, do you own your car, your race car? She said, yeah, I own it personally. I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. And then, do you have an LLC? And she's like, no, I don't. I'm like, you really need to, particularly that race car. Think of the worst thing that can happen with that race car is it goes out into the grandstands and somebody's killed and you own it personally. You are personally liable for that injury. And that's expensive, it's hard, and it's horrible. So what you want to do is put your race car in an LLC. Number one, that's reason enough there to create the LLC and put the ownership of the race car in the LLC, so that if that horrible things happens, your personal assets, your house, your 401k, your retirement is not subject to that liability. Because those plaintiffs lawyers, I'm sorry, I have to say it, but those plaintiffs lawyers are looking for the deep pocket, and they'll do whatever they can to get to where the bucket of money is. So for that, if you're driving a car, you own your race car, I would highly advise you put it in an LLC and put all those motorsports assets over there.
It's funny that you say that, because to be fair, anyone who doesn't have an LLC who's on the call, who's considering it, it's very easy to create an LLC. So these are not oppressive, steps that you have to take, first of all. Secondly, I will say I have a multi-year career in automotive prior to racing, and worked in the space where people were buying exotic luxury vehicles. And for instance, I worked for Aston Martin for years. And people that even own those vehicles will own those cars as in LLCs. just because there's a vulnerability of, if they were to get into an accident with somebody on the road, there's this perception that that person's very wealthy. And so like there's always and again, hope for the best, prepare for the worst scenario. And so you'd be surprised at how many just general people will even have an LLC for that. So let alone now we're in the racing space where we have a lot of different vulnerabilities. It's always something to consider. So I think, and again, the bottom line too, is it's an easy thing to establish. One thing that we should say too, when we're saying about the LLC and then like the S Corp designation, et cetera, is, in addition to having a good attorney to talk to, everybody should have a good accountant. And there are accountancies that are accountant offices that are a little bit better with racing teams and racing drivers than others. And it's one of those things, if you haven't yet, ask your fellow driver, ask your fellow teams who they use as a recommendation, get a couple of names, interview them. Again, you always have to make your own decision but sometimes it's good to just find out who other people have been using and whatever, because I will say, again, there's some nuances to what we do. Why exactly you're not just going to go to any particular lawyer to ask for advice. You're not going to go to any particular accountant and ask advice, because there is some subtlety here that should be, that we need to kind of, it's only going to benefit you in the long run. Let's talk about, yep, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I will echo, creating the LLC is very simple. It's in most states it's $200, and there's $100 or $200 filing fee. You have to file once a year. You open your checking account, you go ahead and fund that, and you operate it. So it's very easy. That, in addition to any of my motorsports clients, create an LLC that can hold all your motorsports liability, get motorsports insurance. It's not that expensive. It's worth it. So those things are very minimal things you could do to protect your personal assets.
Exactly. And obviously, like I have a professional racing team, insurance it's mandatory. Obviously you all have to have it. And but there are, same thing, just like there are specific vendors. You're not going to go there, if you need to know where to find good motorsport insurance companies, that's one of those things that, again, ask around, because there's a handful of them. They're not 1,000 different motorsport insurance companies, but there's probably 20 that you could talk to that definitely know what they're doing, and make sure that, and again, they're going to make sure that you have the right coverages. And these are those things to just not be afraid to ask the question, because remember, as I like to remind everybody was a rookie once. There was a time that Chip Ganassi had to ask the question of where to get the insurance. So,
that's right. That's right.
You want to ask. We have a question from Zandara. Hello, Z. Curious about the tax implications of transferring very expensive assets like race cars into the LLC. Do you have an idea of tax implications of like when you're transferring assets, or that's better asked of an accountant?
Yeah, I'm not a tax attorney and I don't do that. I would think when you're transferring, if it's transferring from your personal assets into the LLC when you first start it, it would be deemed a capital contribution. And I don't know that it's a taxable event, because usually when you're starting that LLC, you're going to put some cash into it. And if you go ahead and contribute your car, you should be able to just transfer the title into the LLC. That's me. I'm not a tax attorney. I would actually CPA, but I don't see it as being a taxable event. You're not selling it. You're not trading it. You're contributing.
It's not income. Yeah.
It's not income.
It's income. It's an asset. Question. Merchandising. So when we talk about a lot of people, even people kind of coming up the ladder of racing, have their own merchandise. So what can you talk about merchandising rights to sell and use logos? So let's say you're a driver and you've got the rights to use team logos or to use sponsor logos. And then on the flip side, you've created a brand as a driver and now you have an agreement with a team. At what point do you give your rights away, or should you, or not, not rights, but, usage of them to have the right to use your logo? Is there benefit of that? And how do you navigate merchandising?
Yeah. So what I would advise the drivers out there is, first of all, you own your name, image, and likeness. You own that. You have a right of you have a right of publicity in your name, image, and likeness. And there's a lot of noise about that with college sports, but you own that. If you were going to give your name, image, and likeness, the right to use your name, image, and likeness to a team, and they're going to use that name, image, and likeness on a T-shirt and they're going to sell it and they make money, you should be able to get paid for that. So I would say, sure, if you're gonna, just what I don't want, I see a lot of agreements, where people are very excited and it's hidden in the contract. It's little tiny language, here's all the NIL rights, and we have the right to use your name, image, and likeness for publicity and for marketing and for advertising. And we can put oh, and we have the right to use it for merchandise. And that's all it says. Don't sign that. Sure, you have the right to use that on merchandise to be mutually agreed upon, which means we'll talk about it later, or we have the right to use that on our merchandise as we approve and as we negotiate financial terms in each instance. That way you set the stage up. You can use my name and you're like, sure, I'm a good partner. You can use mine. I just want, whether it's 5% or 10 or 15, or whether it's 1 or 2%, we'll figure out what that is. But you want to make sure you're not giving away that right for free. And I see it happen a lot. That's for you to protect yourself. But the same, you may want to say, hey, I'm going to, and in that agreement, if you give them the right to use your name, image, and likeness for merchandise, it's not exclusive. You're not giving it to them exclusively, right? So we go back to the beginning. Know what you're giving.
That means that you can still print your own merchandise. It's not just them. Is that what that means?
That means, yeah, if you say, team, I'm going to give you the right to use my name, image, and likeness exclusively in motorsports for merchandise, that means I can't use my name anymore. Okay. So what I want is you have the non-exclusive right to use my name, image, and likeness in association with the team and these specific sponsors in these particular events. I'll give you that right, but then all the rest of the rights revert back to me. So now I maintain my own name, image, and likeness. I can go to one of my personal sponsors that doesn't conflict with the team because we worked that out in the team agreement, and I can do my own merchandise. I see people younger and younger and younger holding back their merchandising rights. Thank you, Dale Earnhardt, for showing us all how to do it. Holding back my merchandising rights and being very stingy with giving them out. I think that's a good strategy, because once you get away, you can't get back, but you just create laws for yourself, but you're also protecting yourself. So that's
examples over the years of like Richard Petty giving away stuff a little bit too freely, and then other people were using his name on things that
at the end he didn't know the name to his team. I mean, that's really sad.
Yeah, those are cautionary tales.
You've just got to be very, very, and look at Tina Turner, right? She didn't even own her name, and then you got that whole story. But just know that you have the power to control your name, image, and likeness. You don't have to give those rights. And I would say be very, again, it's all about leverage, and it's the deal and how much do you want to do it. But if you're going to give away rights, and if you're going to give it exclusively, make sure it's very limited. It's for this season only. Because very limited.
On the flip side, right? If the team, like I have to do a thing when in the IndyCar series where we do have to grant that the series can print T-shirts and things that they sell in the IndyCar website or are at the track in the IndyCar thing. So we have to do that. We're obligated to do that. But there's limitations to what they can do. Now we also get approval rights on all the items. They have to show us the images. We can make little adjustments. I mean, it's within reason. It's not back and forth. And obviously you have to reply to them very quickly and get back to it and, get back to them so they can put things into production. But you understand it from that perspective, like they want everybody to participate. They want to have a full store of merch. And then meaning for the series, and the series should, because obviously they're promoting us and there's value to that. So then we just get a percentage of, what do you call it? The
royalties. You get paid a royalty.
Yeah. You just get a royalty check.
But that's right.
Cash in that royalty check. It's like tens upon tens of dollars.
The residuals, but you're getting consideration for use of your intellectual property, which you should get paid. It may be a minimal amount, but at least you're establishing there's some value there. And yes, you have to, and if anybody wants to use your intellectual property, you want to have the approval rights and how it looks like, you want it to be reasonable. That's all protection of your intellectual property. So, and when
there's value for us too, right? Because they're promoting. And so like anybody, when you're in any sort of series or again, climbing up or let's say you do a great deal with Dunkin' Donuts, and then Dunkin' Donuts wants to have, your signature on their, giveaway mug. with your car number. Absolutely. Like there's a lot of these things that, yes, you don't want to give it away. You want to actually have it be working. It's just the idea of limiting the language.
Correct. Limiting the language. And there is that balance between, do I just want a straight royalty or I'm doing this for marketing purposes? Okay, I'm going to promote me. They're going to put my face on my signature at every single Dunkin' Donuts across the United States. Okay, I can't pay for that.
I want that. Yeah,
I want that exposure.
Yeah,
sure,
I want the cardboard cutout there. Yeah.
Sure, you can use it for a period and it's limited, and then it all reverts back to me. So there is that marketing consideration versus just the straight out payola. But it's a balance, making sure that you're getting paid something, you're getting some consideration for your rights. You're also marketing yourself, you're limiting your exposure, and you want to make sure at the end of the day, you don't grant lifetime rights. I had oh, bless her heart, I had a client. This wasn't a motorsports client. It was a modeling agency, but she had a picture. Some photographer took her picture. She signed 100% lifetime rights in that photo, release all her rights forever in perpetuity throughout the universe, could never get them back. And now here's her
that
photo.
one photo, or like a series of photos from a shoot.
It was some kind of shoot she did. And lo and behold, the photo got sold into like a Getty, and it's around the globe on like a T-Mobile commercial. And she's like, I'm not getting paid. I'm like, there's nothing we can do.
Yep.
This is a clad. You signed away all your rights. Just be careful. Just be careful. Talk to somebody.
So, and I know that you were not party to this, but when you saw the shenanigans back and forth, that people remember there was an IndyCar thing where somebody was under agreement to a team, and then all of a sudden another team is saying that that they have that driver under agreement. How does stuff like that happen? And again, I know you're not involved with it, which is why I can ask, because I'm just asking, like, just two ladies talking. But how does something like that happen? And what probably happened there?
So, it's all public knowledge. I mean, what happened in Formula One and then what happened in IndyCar? I mean,
does everybody know this story? Basically, that was it Pato Award? Yeah.
Pato Award was under contract with Chip Ganassi Racing, and Chip thought he had an extension for another year and announced, hey, Alex is going to be us the next year. I think it was 2003. It was this year. Then Alex puts out a tweet, says, oh no, I'm going to go drive for McLaren. And Chip Ganassi says, Alex Palou. He said, no, we're not.
Alex Palou, yeah.
Yeah. And so they got into a very public tiff about it. And I was surprised it got so public. Normally when this happens, it's behind doors. It doesn't hit the papers. You don't talk about it. It's very, very quiet. So I was surprised that it got as public as it did.
Right. And again, because we're in the social media is where things sometimes are not your friend. And I think that was a thing too. And that, I guess the cautionary tale there too is, let's say you do find yourself in any sort of legal hiccup. Don't go to social media. It's not the leverage you think it is. Don't go to social media, because here's the thing. I don't represent Alex, and I don't know him. I think he probably got, in my opinion, he got some bad legal advice, because I don't think he should have gone up against Chip Ganassi, because what's going to happen on his next driver's negotiation? You're the next team owner that's going to sign. You're like, I don't know if he's good. I don't know if he's good for his deal. What you want to be for a driver is you want to, I committed to you for 3 years. I'm a good partner. I'm going to drive as hard, as fast as I can for those 3 years. I'm going to be a good sponsor. I'm going to be a good person. When we're done with our exclusive negotiation, I may go to another team, but when I'm committed to you, I'm committed to you. You want your reputation to be that way. You don't want your reputation, a year ahead of time, I think I'm going to switch teams, and it's total breach. Obviously, it was a breach of contract, because he ended up racing for Chip for another year. So I don't know what about like the term of a contract. What about the negotiation period? So when you talk about renewal and options to renew, and there's those exclusive negotiation periods. So how, as a driver, what do I want when I'm putting that in the agreement of like when I can go talk to other teams, or obviously you can engage in a conversation with your current team at any time for renewal. But what about when you want to maybe go somewhere else? How is that baked into the agreement, and how does that work?
Great question. So if I'm on the driver's side, I don't want any exclusive negotiating period. I want it to stop, and I want to be able to shop and see what's out there. Let me take that back a little bit. Again, it's a balance. If you like the team if you're with a team for 3 years, you're coming up for a renewal. There's we want to see if we want to renew or we don't want to renew. If it's a bad relationship and you don't want to renew, you want to get out of there as fast as you can. If it's a good relationship, you want to stay there, you want to renegotiate your deal and you want to stay. So there's two different situations. So generally an exclusive negotiation benefits all sides. If it's, you're a driver, you want it sooner rather than later. Teams usually want it at the very end of the contract. We've got 30 days at the very end. Because they want to tie you up as long as they possibly can, have a short negotiation and then renew you because they want to limit your options. If you're on the driver's side, you want to, let's say it's a February through November season. And so I would start negotiating in June, in August, because we want to see if we get to the end. That's why you have the silly season. They're all in the exclusive negotiating periods. They're all negotiating. You don't want to, so exclusive negotiating, what is exclusive negotiation? Means you had to negotiate exclusively with your team for this. From this date, I make it very clear. It's from this date to this date. We're exclusive negotiating. And then after the date expires, the driver and the team are free to talk to any third parties. It's very clear. There's no gray area. Some of them are very gray. I bet you Alex Pullo's was written very gray, but I doubt that. I know Chip's lawyer. He's a good lawyer, and I don't think there was any mistake in that agreement. Anyway, that's all.
I think most of us in the business were all kind of scratching our head, like it's a weird one. Yeah, it was weird for a lot of us. Yeah,
it's a weird one. So you want to go to your contractual commitment, and so the timing you want to. If you're on the driver, you want to. Not near at the end of the season, but you want to give you're usually 60 days, 90 days. We're going to exclusively negotiate. And then after that, we're free to go talk to third parties. Some agreements have an exclusive negotiation, but then they have a right of last negotiation, which means we're going to exclusively negotiate with you for a period of time. If we don't reach an agreement, then you're free to go negotiate with third parties. But if you get a deal with a third party, we get a right to match that so they can tie you up even. This is more likely in sponsorship agreements, and it depends on which side you are. They're very difficult to get out of. But those exclusive negotiating rights of first negotiation, rights of first negotiation, rights of last negotiation, are they need to be very carefully drafted and clear so that it's clear, particularly if that relationship's in a bad place. Yeah. Don't want to put yourself in a breach of contract and give the other side something to penalize.
Reason to terminate you early. Right.
Correct. It's got to be very.
It's so a little known fact. I could say this from a few different wearing a few different hats in my professional career. Roger Penske often negotiates his contracts a year in advance. Like when things are renewal, like if you've got a 3-year deal, after year 2, he's talking about where that goes, which is amazing. That's extreme on the other side, but shows you. But obviously, he knows a thing or two about agreements and how to structure things. And that's, and I could say that even when I was, we had a NASCAR program with Dodge, and we were the engine supplier to Penske. And I remember coming in and having a contract on my desk, like, yeah, but then we want to talk about renewing this. I'm like, we still have a year and a half left, like a 3-year deal. We're halfway through. It's like, yeah, it's time to talk about it. Like time to talk about it. But listen, it works, whatever happened to Roger Penske, whatever, successful. So we only have a few minutes left. Does anybody have any questions in the audience that I've been watching the chat, but certainly if anybody else has any questions, we can unmute you and get some real-time questions. Hopefully some of this was of value. Kim, can we unmute the people?
Yeah, let's see. A few people have unmuted themselves along the way. I think everybody can unmute themselves, but if you can't, raise your hand.
Okay, yeah, I think it defaults where you have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Once we like it's a toggle. But by all means, if anybody has any specific questions for Laurie, So we did have a question ahead of time too, Laurie, about bracket negotiation. What's bracket negotiation? Is it something that would apply here?
Yeah, so bracket negotiation is a negotiation tactic. It's usually used in personal injury situations, and when you have two parties that are negotiating a dollar amount, and there's a big difference. So one side say you owe me $250,000, and the other says no, it's 25,000. So there's a great disparity, and where those parties are negotiating, the parties will say, okay, we'll agree to a bracket. I'm at 250. I'll agree to come down 10%, but then you agree to go up 10%. So it's a lockstep to try to get parties to agree. I don't see it a lot in our sport. I don't see it in employment agreements. I don't see it in the personal services agreements or sponsorships. And usually when those negotiations happen, I'm the lawyer, I'm negotiating the deal. When I get the deal, usually the money's decided, the terms decided, the basic business deal is done. My job is to clarify it and narrow, and then also make sure that things are market where they need to be. So, and please ask questions if you guys want to know something. I'm not your lawyer, but I'll happily help you with anything that you've got a question about.
And just so everybody's clear, I didn't say this in the beginning, Laurie is part of our working group for Women in Motorsport North America, so has been with us from the beginning. Also helped us frame creating Women in Motorsport North America as a nonprofit, helped us with setting up the legal entity so that we could do all of this, because remember, this was just started as a germ of an idea with I reached out to Lynn St. James and said, all right, we need to kind of work all together and figure out how we can help the broader network again. And of course, what we're trying to have this group be unique in that it's about all roles, all different racing disciplines, so that we can kind of have a place where we can ask questions, mentor each other. Because obviously if we have kind of everybody at the table, we were very strategic in that working group to have a lawyer and a PR person and somebody that's running a venue and running a team and having drivers and kind of having that cross section. Then when we started throwing around ideas of how WIMNA could best help a group of people, we kind of tried to have every voice at the table as much as we could to try to move the ball down the field or the car around the track.
Yeah, let's get our metaphors right. Metaphors, symbols. I guess it's our metaphors.
Hopefully we'll see you guys at the Women with Drive Summit in Phoenix, November 7th and 8th. So this year, we have a lot of keynotes and panel discussions, but then also some breakouts. And so the idea, of course, of those breakout discussions is to have more closed circle conversations, and then that way you can also ask these sort of direct questions and of Laurie and others that are in